All right, good morning once again. Okay, so can anybody remind us where we stopped last time? That is still under JavaScript's control structure, right? So how did we define the entire concepts of control structure? What role does it play in programming generally? Can anybody help us to summarize? We did mention that it is like the backbone of what? Programming, which determine the communication, right? Which determine the communication. And we have, if I can remember, we started from the conditional what? Statements, under which we discuss if statements, right? Followed by else statements. And then which other one? Switch, right? Okay. And I said in our next class, we'll be looking at the last aspect of the control structure, which is the the for loop or the loops, right? So let's quickly start with that. Let's look at JavaScript's loop. JavaScript's loop. How do we define loop? Right, loop is a programming construct. Before we look at the various types of loop, let's look at what is loop in programming. Loop is a programming what? Construct that allows you to execute a block of code repeatedly. I said loop in programming is in programming. I said loop. A loop is a what? Programming construct that allows you to execute a block of code. That allows you to execute a block of what? Code. Are we together? Repeatedly. That is what? Continuously. When it gets to the end, it will start all over. That is when we can use the word what? Loop. Are we together? You know, even when you are playing song like your movie players, there is a function that will normally click on if you want the song to what? To loop, right? Which means that we want it to what? To continue. Once it plays to the end, it should start what? All over. That means you have already what? Loop what? The music or the song. So that's same concept. Let's continue. Comma, either for a specific number of iteration. So I want you to underline the keyword there, iteration. Either for a specific number of iteration or until a certain condition is met. I want you to underline that last section because that is the major driver of this concept. You identifying when the loop will stop once a condition is met. Let me repeat that aspect. I said what? Either for a specific number of iteration or until a certain condition is what? is met. So since we said looping is, to repeat an action, right? That is the short way of describing the concept. So within your app, you want an action to repeat continuously or repeatedly. Then you have to involve this aspect of control structure. A practical example is your Microsoft window. How many of us know that they have already programmed it in a way that until you shut down your system, the OS keep running. So the criteria, so each time you go to start and select shutdown, that is when you are stopping the iteration. The iteration. Are we getting it? So that is the reason why once you start a system and it goes off without your consent, it tells you that something is wrong, right? Because ordinarily my OS shouldn't shut down without me commanding it, because the way it has been programmed, except I hibernate it. Even hibernate it does not mean that you are totally shutting it down. Okay, so it means that something has gone wrong. Maybe a virus is now in the system that is helping you to click on the shutdown to stop the looping action. So there are so many instances where this concept, in fact, that is why I told us the other time that it is impossible for you to develop an app with any of the programming languages without involving any of the control structure, either conditional statement or the loop. So in JavaScript, we have different types of loop, right? In JavaScript, or just write note, there are several types of loops in JavaScript so that we know which one of them we want to consider. In JavaScript, there are several types of loop, including one, for loop. So we have the one we call for loop. For loop. Are we together? For loop. So JS loops. I said the first one is for loop. So let's quickly briefly explain, because this is one of the most used loop. A lot of programmers concentrate more on the for loop because of, not because it's easier, but because it's like it fits almost in their scenario. Are you with me? So it's one of the most used control structure under the loop. Right, let's look at the definition of that for loop. The for loop executes a block of code. The for loop executes a block of code for a specified number of iterations. I want you to underline specify number of iterations. So if you are going to use, listen, if you are going to use the for loop concept, then it means that you need to understand the number of times. You must have an idea of how many times. Remember, when I defined it, I said it repeats an action, right? Until a condition, right, is met. So that condition is what is programmed to terminate it. But as long as that condition is not met, then the action will keep playing or repeating. Okay? Now, if you're going to use for loop, then you must specify what we call the initial states. Pay attention here, because this is one of the most logical aspects of programming. You must specify the initial state, and then you must specify the stop, or the stopping step. So we have the beginning step and the stopping what step. Because when you start hearing for I equals to 1, the I plus plus, that is what increments. So in other words, in between, you are saying that for I equals to 0, or for I is greater than what? 0. That is the criteria you are using to define the starting point. The point of what? Iteration. At what point it will start the iteration? Where exactly will it start from? And then when you say what? I plus plus, that is what? Plus plus is what in programming? Is increment. Minus minus means what? Decrements. I asked us to research further when we were learning what? Operators, right? Now, where did I stop there? I've defined what? The for loop. Now, let's quickly take some example of this before we take the next category of loop. So for now, just know that we have only mentioned one type, right? So I don't want us to confuse. So I'm taking them one after the other. Now that we know the definition, let's do some practical so that each time we are bringing anyone, we look at a definition and then we apply what? It at the same time. Let's look at a practical scenario where we can apply the what? The for loop. Now, but before that, so that you'll be guided, because one thing about learning things in technology is, one, to have the knowledge. Two, to know when to solve problem with what? The knowledge. That is where the problem is always is. You see a lot of persons that have skills, but they could be facing a problem that one of the skill can solve, but they don't know that that skill is what can actually what solve it. So let's look at, write this note down. For loop is best when it's best used. Don't try to cite a scenario where you should consider what? The for loop. For loop is best used when you know how many times to run your code. You do see the clause there? When you know how many times to run the code. How many times do you want it to run? So in that case, because if you are using for loop, you must define what? The initial what? State and the what? The end state. So that is why we are saying that before you can think of using for loop, the best scenario should be that when you know how many times do I want it to do? So let me use another script to practicalize this. Remember that this is still what? We are using internal. I think let's use external today. Let's use external because we have used internal several times. I believe you still understand the external concept, right? What is the concept? What is the concept? Okay, let me just create a new file to avoid conflicts. So let's say this one is a loop dot what? JS, right? This is my external JavaScript file. And remember that if you are running external JavaScript, you must connect it with your what? The rendering what? File, which is the HTML, right? Because we cannot render JavaScript direct on the browser. So we have to render it through what? HTML what? Element. So let me also create another HTML element. So this is, sorry, HTML file, loop.what? HTML. Right? So I have two different words, a new file now. Now here I have to activate my HTML default word syntax. So here what we are learning with this file is what? JS what? Loop, right? Loop concepts or control structure. So that is where this topic is emanating from. Okay, then I have to go and I have to add the script tag for connecting my JavaScript external file. Remember the one that has what? SRC, right? In other words, you want to link You are not writing your JavaScript in this HTML file. You are connecting your JavaScript to this HTML file. Okay, that is why we are consulting the script with what? Source path or attribute. And then I will just put the / and then go to what? To the JavaScript what? File you want to connect. So which means that as I continue writing my JavaScript here, if I come back here and render it, it will what? Probably synchronize all the JavaScript what? Functions on the element I'm using to display. Okay, now because of the method we are going to use to output our results, there is need for us in our HTML file. We do what? We create what? HTML what? Element. Let's say what? P, right? And then let's assign an ID. I know we have done all this, but I'm stylishly, reversing. Now, let's say demo. Let's say demo. And then now, why I created this element is just to help me to output the JavaScript what functions we are going to write. Are we together? Now, let's go back to our function. Remember using comments. What we are learning right now is called what? JS what? Loop. Control structure. Control structure. That is what we are currently what? Learning. Now, I said we are looking at what? The first example. Example of what? Forwards. What type of loop are we experimenting? Example of what? Forward loop, right? Good. Now, what is the app that we want to develop? What exactly what we want to develop? So let's say we want to display numbers. Now, we want to display number 1 to 5. Are you with me? I want to display to the user number 1 to 5. And ordinarily, if I'm not using loop concept, I will have created that many variables to display 1 to 5 to viewer. How many variables you will have created before you can display 5 numbers? 5 variables, right? So I will say what? Number 1, I'll store 1 inside. Number 2, I'll store 2 inside, down to 5. And then I will now what? Display all their variables, right? They will now be able to see all the number. Now, this is exactly what the loop is going to solve. So there's no point of you doing that. A single function can iterate. Can you see the iteration now? It means what? Hover, pan across them. Now, but before it starts the panning, there must be a starting point, initial point, where it will start the iteration from, and then always come back, and then start from there, and then come back. Each time it comes back, it's increasing. Are you following? Each time it comes back, it's increasing. Now, the logic is that the first iteration to output 1, it will start from 0. You now say a number greater than what? 0. That is how it will iterate what? And display what? 1. Are you with me? But if you say a number less than 0, it cannot display anything. Now, that is what? It will go to the end and output 1, and then reset everything back. And then as it's resetting, it will continue from where the first one stopped. Which means that what? For it to display 2, it will iterate one more time. It will iterate again and add 1, because you must have set increment, that what? Plus, which means that what? Each time you come back, add the previous one plus the one you are iterating, we make it to display what? 2, right? Then if you go back again, iterate, add another one plus the 2 that it must have what? Iterated, make it what? 3. Now you have set your boundary, that what? When the number is less than 5, for example. So I just want to also understand that concept. So now let's quickly look at the full application. So I'm going to start by activating it. For is a function. So you have to what? Open the parenthesis what? Bracket. Now inside that bracket, whatever you put there is known as the expression. What action
is going to perform. And whatever you put there is also known as the function what? Input, or what? Parameter. What the function will work with. So what do you want the function to do? The function is to iterate. So for, we will now say let I is equals to 1. Let I equals to 1, you end it there. What does that mean? That is a variable. Am I communicating? That is variable. You created a variable called what? I, and you store 1 inside. You know why? Because that is what you are going to use to define the first step of the iteration. So JavaScript will know, oh, I'm to start iterating from what? The first one. From 1, because I want to display 1 to what? 5. So if I want to display 0 to 5, what will be my I value? I will equal to what? 0. If I want to iterate 2 to 5, what will be my I? What will be my I? 2. So that is why I said that what? This is best used where you know how many times. Me, I already know that, okay, I want to display what? 5 times. And this 5 times, we display what? 5 different what? Value to the users. That is the reason why I started by declaring, okay, let me acknowledge the start point, 1. Then after that, you will now do I is greater than, is it greater than or less than? I is what? Less than or equals to 5. Are you following? And then I will end it there. So where is this first step? Quickly, where is the first step? You are, if you are using for loop, you must define what? Your first step and the what? The last step. So between what we have written inside the for bracket now, which one is actually defining the first step and the last step? 5, where I is greater or equals to. Now let's go back to the definition that says that what? It will continue until what? A criteria is met, right? Now, what is the criteria that will determine when the looping will stop? Where it displays a number, once you get to look at it, it will display the first one, 1, right? You will now ask yourself, is 1 equals to 5 or is 1 less than 5? Yes, one of the criteria is met. 1 is what? Less than what? 5. That is why it will output 1. But it will still loop because it has not gotten to where the value that is outputted is what? Greater than what? 5. So it will not loop it. So it will loop again and output 2. Then you ask yourself, is 2 equals to 5 or is 2 less than 5? 2 is less than what? 5. So which means that what? The iteration continue. Then it will output 3. You ask yourself, is 3 less than 5? Quickly, is 3 less than 5? Yes. So which means that what? It will continue, right? Then it will output, you now go to what? 4. Is 4 less than 5? Yes, right? That means what? It will still output what? 5. Let's go for 5 now. 5, look at the condition you set. Is either what? I is equals to 5 if one of the criteria is met to stop. Now, if you put 5 now, is 5 equals to 5? Which means that what? It has met one of the criteria, right? Good, then it will stop. So if I want to display 1 to 6, if I put here 6, that means I can put here what? 6. I don't know if anybody is getting the concept. Good. Now, what will happen? Each time it iterates, what will happen? It will increase because if there is no increment, it will not increase from 1 to what? 5. So that is why after this, the next thing you say what? I plus plus. That I plus plus means what? At the end of each iteration, increase by what? 1. So now we have to display what? We have to create our block code. Remember that from, I don't know, okay, from a conditional statement now, right? We have done something like what? Code block, right? You have questions? Speaker to you want to use comma. How have you used comma before that work for you? Okay, you are just trying to find out whether if you use comma it will work. The way I will answer you is that when I come to the class work session, use the comma, run your code. I think that will give you a practical answer. Remember that JavaScript is very sensitive word language. Once you miss the syntax, it does not tolerate nonsense. It's not like Python that correct a lot of things for you because it's an AI language. So JavaScript, debugging in JavaScript is more tedious than what? Debugging in what? In Python. Now, and as you are writing your code, anywhere you see, okay, in fact, you will even know now, let's find that. The moment I put that comma, right? Did you see this red line underline here? And did you see this alert? This means what? Syntax error. Something is wrong. You cannot run the code successfully when you see this kind of error. Always make sure that what? You have that kind of word symbol what? Free. What was here before? Semicolon. Now, let's continue. Now, your code block, remember when we defined it, we said what? We mentioned code block, right? Did we mention code block? Okay, I think whatever you are writing here is what you want to output. What you want to do. Now, we have to bring one of the output methods. Remember that for us to have created an element with an ID, that suggests to me that we want to settle for what? Document.what? Get element by what? ID. That is what we want to use what? Inner HTML, right? To display or to store the HTML element. So for that, I will just come back to my HTML document and know the name of my what? My ID is what? Demo. And then go back to my JavaScript. And then I will say document. Now we want to output the numbers that will have been iterated and stored, right? That will be outputted to what? To the user. The document dot what? Get ID is what? Demo dot inner HTML, then equals to. What are we outputting? What are we outputting? I, right? Good. So we'll now put what? I here and then end it. Now let's go and run the code. Where do we run the code? From the HTML what? Rendering, right? I'll go back to the HTML. Then right click and then use my Five server or live server to display it on the browser. So there is complex aspect of all this that we are learning, which you can deepen your research towards to master. Depending on the app you are building. So why did it output? Now let's also apply the same code. Let's apply it now. Let me see if we are going to debug. Why is mine displaying what? 5. Are we correct? From the code, are we correct? Is it 5 we are supposed to display? What did you output on? I can't hear you. Speak out. Okay. You will put plus here. Inner HTML. Yeah, here. So what did you get when you put plus? Okay, so that means because of this method, who else have confirmed? Is somebody else should confirm? So why did he have put 5 without that plus? Can you interpret that? So let's go to the code now. Okay. So initially we did not add what? Plus here. So it has put what? Only 5. So what are you saying is the reason why this plus is necessary so that others can understand it? When we assign the variable, right? Good. Are you following? When you assign the variable, it means it's the last one you are storing inside. Because variables are meant to store what? One value. So, but when you put plus, you are saying that what? It should what? Display all the values at once. A single value, because as we have the output here now, this is just like a single what? Value. And so all the iterated values are now stored in that variable as what? 1 to 5. So let everybody confirm that before we proceed. Oh yeah, briefly. Oh yeah. Now, let's use another method to display this as well, which is the console.log, because these are actually what you expect to use to be confirming your code sometime when you are learning than using in some cases. So let's say we want to use a console.what? Log. Console.log. So let's add a kind of description. Let's say what? Display 1 to 5. 1 to 5. Add a comma and display what? I. And your code. Now, remember that if you are using this method, it will display in what? Your browser what? Console, which you have to right-click and go to what? Inspect, then go to what? Console. So you can see that what? It outputted what? All the numbers. Can you see it now? So that logic was because of the method we are using, which is the what? The inner HTML. But if you use console, it's going to display all of them. And you can see that it's attached the statement 1 to 5, 1, 1 to 5, 2. Have we also confirmed that? Okay. So let's use another method. Alert, right? Let's use alert. Before we, so if I want to all documents, there's another method that we can use just for debugging. Document does what? Writes, so that it will display it on the browser body. So let's say display 1 to 5, then comma I, then end your code. So you can see. All right, now let's quickly go for the next one. Remember that we are still under what? Type of what? For loop, right? Types of loop in JavaScript. Types of loops in JavaScript. So number 2 is while loop.
While loop. Let's start with the definition. While loop. While loop. While loop or JavaScript while loop executes a block of code. Executes a block of code. Execute a block of code as long as condition is true. 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 So let's really take an example here. Let's quickly take an example here. So the example here, this is the file we are working with. While loop. While loop example. So let's start by creating a global variable. Let's bottle, or can use anything depending on what's just a concept for us to understand it. So this is a global variable. This is a variable that is declared outside the scope of the function. So we'll start with while instead of for. While is a function. So you open the, and then what you are testing here, the expression is the variable. Just like the way we say I, let I, even in the case of what? For. So what we are going to call here, what we are going to compare is what? The bottle. Bottle greater than, where bottle is greater than 0. So you start thinking of different scenarios where you are going to apply it as your assignments. Different example from the concept I'm using, just to expand your knowledge. So now we created a variable, just like an app we want to develop. Maybe somebody wants to know the number of bottles he can take. So what we are saying now is that what? One, we have stored 3 what? Bottle in bottle as a variable. Now we are saying that where the value in bottle is greater than 0. So there is an outcome we want to get. So what will happen where the value in the bottle is greater than what? 0, then let's say console dot. So what we should be paying more attention to is the syntax that differentiates each of these what? Loop function. Whenever you want to use for, what is the standard syntax? You want to use while, what is the standard syntax? That is what we are trying to, acknowledge here. So in this, I would say drink a bottle. Drink a bottle. So remember the definition. Who can read again? The definition of the while so that we can conform it with the expected output. I said what? While loop execute a block of code as long as what? The condition is true. Now, what condition have we set now? What condition have we set now? Good. Now, once you have, if we run this code, then it will come outside here and say the variable, which is what? The bottle. So if I do something like this, minus, minus, what are you saying? What do you think will be the expected output? Let me comment some of this one to avoid conflicts first. Can anybody interpret it? There is a condition that will determine for us to see what? The number of bottle. Drink a bottle. So how many times will that statement be outputted? Nobody can suggest, eh? You think 3 times. Okay, let's go and run the code and see. Is the condition met? Because we say as long as the condition is met. Is the condition met first? Because we say what? Let bottle is equal to what? 3, right? And then we say while bottle is greater than what? 0, right? Of course, which is correct. What we have in bottle is greater than what? 0. So then as long the condition is true, then it should what? Output what? This. So let's check. It's taking time. Or should we use another? Try using another. Has it outputted? So let's use another method to display it so that we can be seeing. Try maybe document.write. Somebody should try that and get back to us. So what we are supposed to get is what? Drink bottle 3 times. That is what we are supposed to get. Drink bottle 3 times. Is it 2 times? Okay, your own has output with which method? Dot write. You want display how many? Okay. My one is not that mean my right click is not even working. No, because it was looping now. If you are able to expect, but my own I'm like clicking, my own is still loading. 3, right? Yes. Which is correct. Good. Before to go and shut down my browser, let me run away. Okay, so now I am going to stop here. Your assignment, right? Your assignment, number 1 assignment is to create, reapply for an while loop with different scenarios. So create your logic. Second assignment is research on do while loop. Research on do while loop. Are you with me? I want to see whether if there's anyone that I feel that might be a bit difficult so I can take it. We have for off, we have list them for off, for in, let's list them. For off, for in, these are. We have break and continue. So these are actually optional, but I want us to dip into them. So what I will do in the next class is to, well, let me see if I can just give us hint on one of them. Let's just add the, what's the time now? I think we still have like 20 minutes, have we? Let me see if I can. Let me complete this so that you use the assignment to complete the rest. Let's look at use for array for value, right? Use for array. It's just that we have not treated array. That is why I wanted it to just reset, because if we have done array, well, let me just add it. Use for array value. Use for array value. So what we are bringing here is one of the assignments, which is for off. The way we have for in. So remember, it's part of what I mentioned. So let me just take this one so that you can get some hint about it. So for example, the one we want to take now is what? Use for loop. Use for loop. Array. Array values. Just hope that you code, because array is a subject that's the topic that we are yet to consider. I think after this now, we'll get to JS DOM. After that, before the array. But let me just see if you can have a concept before time. It's simple, it's not difficult. So here we want to create a variable that can store what? Multiple value. You know, the variable we have been creating since can only hold what? One value. Now we want to create a variable and we want to store what? Multiple value. The concept of it is that when we get to JavaScript array and objects, that is where we understand that there is another way we can hold multiple values instead of what? Multiplying or duplicating what? Variable. But we are borrowing it here because we want to see how we can iterate the values in what? An array. How we can use for loop to call out to display the values in what? An array. It will make it look more real. That is why I just want us to look at it. So let's say we want to create an array of fruits. So let's say array of fruits. In other words, a variable that is storing. This is the syntax for creating array. The array name is your variable, and then the square brackets is what you use in selecting array values. The same thing if they are number, you put the number without putting them. So the array values are string. So I have to put them in brackets. So let's say what? Apple. And then comma, another value. So just separate them with comma. Banana, for example. Banana. The next array value is, let's say, mango. Okay, then we end it here. So the whole of this line is just to declare what? An array. So this let is the variable what? Initiation command as we know it. Now here, Normally, if I say document.getElement, right, by id.inner equals to what? Fruits. It will what? Display what? All this. Are we together? But what we are saying is that we want to apply this for loop concept to output the values of what? Array. What are the values in this array now? We have what? Apple, banana. Now we want to use for to loop them. So you say for let's fruits. Let fruits. So this is just like a new variable you are creating inside what? The for loop to capture all the values in the what? The array. So the concept is what? Of that we are bringing. Of fruits. Of what? Fruits. Let fruits of fruits. Now, this other fruit is what? Hope you know that this fruits is this one here. Why this one is the one that you are, that the values here will be treated and what? Stored in within the what? The for function. Bosco, are you still with us? Now let's output, let's say console.log, console.log. Which of them are you outputting? Please pay attention. Which of them, between this fruit and the other one, which one are we outputting in our output method? Between this one. Remember, this one now, I deliberately left S here, right? This one without S, just to differentiate it from the name of my array. So which one are we outputting? Fruit. Is it the one with S? The one without S? Because that is the one that I have stored what? So the keyword that we are emphasizing on here is what? The of. Just like the other assignment I give you that I have what? For in. For in. This one is what? For of. So I'm just trying to show us different way we can iterate. So what is happening here is that what? This of is what is taking all this that are in that array are storing them in what? This one within the for. Then this one will now what? Output it. So I'm going to what? Display what? Fruits. So what is the expected results? What do we expect to get? Let's go there. I think my browser has crashed, so you can try your own. In fact, let me use another. What I'm going to do now, I think I need to close this browser and load it again, but let me think you should be able to go now. Should be able to go now. It doesn't. I have to switch back to. Okay. So let me inspect to see whether we see those values outputted. You can see all of them here outputted. So the only syntax you need to take note of is what? The logic of this. The only thing we brought here now is what? The of. So the same thing as you research, you can also find out for what? In. That one is used for what? Objects. So that is why I want you to go and research, because before you can actually digest this is where you understand what? JavaScript array and what? Objects. Because this for is when you want to iterate the value in an array. Why in for in is when you want to iterate what? The value of what? An object. So just research when we get to object. If I remember, I can still bring us back here to complete it, because now you don't understand what is called key value pair. That is for objects. Any question? So go and research on those topics I gave you. So the break I continue with can help you to skip. Maybe you have, like that time that we iterated 1 to 5. So we can start that, okay, the first iteration, iterate from 1 to 2, then skip 3, then go to 4 and 5. So when you do your research, that is kind of thing you are going to see. It's equivalent to that for the thing that you set some points to stop and then to continue. So all these are concepts that are used in programming logic. Any question? So go and deepen your research, because what we are doing right now is at learning stage like this, there is a dimension you are to go. Otherwise, you run away that the program is too hard. That's why we have Bootstrap for implementing what? This language, practical wise. So, but you cannot learn Bootstrap when you have not mastered the language. Because Bootstrap is the compilation of CSS, HTML, and what? And JavaScript, just for responsiveness. And some advanced JavaScript functions you can use to probably drive some of your project elements, like carousel.
If you want to write the pure language to create all those AutoCAD, all those things, it's possible, but that you will write so many code. So that is why the language forefather, they look at it that this language is too voluminous. So what they do is that let them come up with what? A framework where they have compiled some of this code. But all you need to do is to learn how to exploit those frameworks, how to communicate those inbuilt functions within the framework. So that is why what I am focusing on here is to master the language itself. That is my major concern. And then when we come to the main application of projects, then we can now leverage on Bootstrap to implement some of these advanced aspects of the language. But if you have your time, if you keep developing yourself for years, you can get to a point whereby you may not consult the framework. You can write all your code, whether you have that tenacity to stay true. Because it will be boring at some points when you are writing like 5 pages just to achieve one thing. Any question?